We're going to talk a little bit about where we come from, and I don't mean Hearst or Bedford or Colleyville. Where do we come from as human beings?
God.
Okay, well, let's go a step below that, okay?
New York.
It happened about, give or take, 9 months before you were born. Mom and dad, right? Okay. Over here we have dad. Over here we have mom. Or mom and dad, okay?
They have to be closer.
Yeah, I know. All right.
Good call, Frank.
Good. That was good. But basically, what you're gonna be my cut up back there. You need to keep it quiet. Now, but mom and dad came together, right? And they each donated half of a cell. Okay, and so these two half cells came together. They created one whole perfect cell. Okay, and life as we know began at this moment. Okay, but as human beings, are we just one giant cell? We grow arms and legs? No. What does this cell do? It multiplies, right? So 1 becomes 2, and 4, and 8, and 16, and so forth, all the way to what makes us today, right? Well, after about 8 days, these cells are about the size of what we call like a little berry. And in literature, it's called the mulberry mass, okay? Now, these cells are what we call undifferentiated, which means you don't know if they're bone tissue, if they're blood tissue, if they're hair or skin or heart tissue. All you know is that it's human being. That's the only thing that you could tell under a microscope, right? They also call these stem cells. You guys ever heard of that? Yeah, okay. Well, what do you think runs what's the master system of the body? What runs everything? The nervous system. Okay, what makes up most of the nervous system? The master computer, the brain and spinal cord. Excellent. So don't you think that would be the most important thing that it forms first? What does that kind of look like? I'm left-handed and I'm a doctor both, but kind of bear with me. It looks like a brain, right? I'll put that down for you guys, can't see. All right, so the brain forms first, right? And it's not really called the brain yet, but after about 8 days, this thing here starts to form this little primitive streak. It's called the notochord. So what do you think that's going to be? The spinal cord, the nerves. So the nerve tissue is it's the most prone to injury tissue. It's soft, it's pliable. So if you have something that's very, very delicate, what do you want to do to it? Protect it. So how do we protect our brain and our spinal cord? With bones, okay? Now, the bone that protects our brain is what? And it's thicker on some people than others, right? Okay. Now, what protects our spinal cord? The vertebra, okay? Now, primary function of bone is for protection. Okay, it also gives us structure. What makes us stand up here, and otherwise we'd just be gobs of goo on the floor, right? So the next thing that starts to happen when we get these little feelers, and they come off of the spinal cord, what are those going to be? Nerves. They're spinal nerves. These are the nerves that exit off between the spine. They feed to all the organs and tissues of the body. Okay? Now at the end of these little feelers here, when we get these little buds, what are those buds going to turn into? What's all the other stuff in our body? Organs. Good answer. Over here we have a neck muscle, because muscle is an organ as well. Over here we have a heart. Okay, that's not what it looks like, but for our purposes today. Over here we have the stomach, right? It's helping you digest that food. Over here we have a pancreas. Okay? Now essentially I could stand up here all morning and draw all the stuff we need to make up the human body, but take forever. Okay, so we don't want to do that. But basically we have everything that we need, right? But there's something that's very, very important that's missing. And it's essential to life. If you don't have it, you're not living. What is it? What's that? Blood, water, air. Those are all external stuff. We take stuff in, we borrow it, and get rid of it. I'll give you guys a hint. It's running that light bulb right above you.
Energy.
Electrical energy. And you're going to say, Dr. Lindell, there's electricity in my body? I'm going to say yes, and I'll prove it to you. Have you guys ever known anybody had a heart test? What do they call it? EKG, right? Or ECG. Anybody know anybody had to have a brainwave test that they used to do in the 80s and 90s a whole lot? What do they call those? EEG, an electroencephalogram. Measures brain waves. You know, they say if you're brain dead or what have you, that's one of the tests that they do. Okay. Ever know anybody had to have a muscle test or had a muscle problem? What do they call it? They call it an EMG. Okay. EMG, electromyogram. If you've ever had one of these, you would remember it because it's very, very painful. They put needles in you and then they electrocute them. Okay? Doesn't sound fun. They even do this for the face. It's not fun, I promise. But what do those three have in common? Electricity. Now, as chiropractors, it's electrical impulses, but we don't like to call it electricity. We like to call it the life force. okay? And the reason called the life force is because that's what it exactly is. If you were to take tissue samples of my body just prior to and just after death and looked at them under a microscope, you wouldn't be able to tell there's any difference. Except for what? What's missing? That life force, okay? Now, the electrical energy, the life force runs from the brain through the spinal cord out to the spinal nerve. So it goes from above, down, and inside out. It also goes backwards here. It tells us that, take your hand off a hot stove, right? So if there's a miscommunication in here, don't you think that those messages are going to be affected?